Hi there and welcome. Thank you for participating in this training session. You are about to begin this module, which provides guidance to you as an employee on HR compliance-related topics. This presentation is brought to you by Cura HR, your HR consulting partner. As an employee with Signia Marketing, you have a responsibility to be familiar with and adhere to the policies and practices we have in place. If you have any questions or are unsure about what to do, your responsibility is to speak up and ask your supervisor or contact Human Resources. Today, we'll be reviewing what HR means to you and Signia, plus Signia's key compliance policies. For each policy, I'll explain the legal and company rules, including what this means for you as an employee. As we continue the module, we will also review Signia's conduct policies. Again, for each policy, I'll explain the company conduct policies, including what this means for you as an employee. At the end of our session, you will be prepared to test your knowledge with a short quiz. Let's get started. First, let's start by talking about what human resources is and how HR supports the workplace and you as an employee. Although Signia does not have a designated HR department or representative, your leadership team is here to help and support you. The goal of Cura HR is to communicate and partner with the leadership team and you. The human resources function has evolved extensively over the last 25 years, as has the way we do business. When you think HR, you might think of the recruiter who worked with you when you came aboard your company. Or you might think about the process of enrolling in your benefits or requesting a leave of absence. It could be you're feeling uncomfortable because you spoke with HR about a harassment issue. These all may be true, and we'll talk about some of these things. As we go through these slides, the key is that HR is a partner in the workplace, and one of our goals is to make it the best work environment possible. HR's role is truly to help companies make good decisions about how to handle things that impact employees, and to help employees leverage these things to be productive and happy. That's a pretty big job, building company culture and making employees happy. But don't forget, we use the word partner. Like the Men in Black, successful HR teams are actually the most successful when everyone works together. Leadership, employees, and HR alike share the responsibility. Where does HR start? One answer is obvious. Sometimes HR activities start with the HR department, HR representative, the leadership team, or with an HR partner, such as Cura HR. Sometimes HR or the leadership team will reach out asking for help from you or other leaders. Maybe we're holding a training like this, and we ask you to participate, learn, and engage. Maybe we're launching an employee engagement survey, and HR will ask for your participation so we can listen to you and make great changes as a result. Or, have you ever wondered if your outfit for the day meets company dress code? You may have asked yourself, is it appropriate to wear ripped jeans or cutoffs to work? Does my outfit look professional and appropriate? Or are you wondering how to tell a coworker, your perfume is bothering me? Perhaps you become pregnant or are involved in a work-related injury and need time off of work for a while. Or what if you have a coworker who smells of alcohol or marijuana? What do you do in these types of situations? You have a support system in place, either through your supervisor, your leadership team, or with HR. You are not expected to be an HR expert. That support is there for you. HR can direct and guide you. But you are responsible for reaching out. If you don't tell us something that's going on, we can't help you. How do you know when to reach out? That's why we're here. We'll cover that in the slides to come. I know you probably care about your job, your company, and employees. For many, that's reason enough to pay attention. On top of that, though, there are legal obligations that your leadership team has. As we go through this training, there may be some specific things to watch out for, but universally, always keep these two things in mind. Policies are in place to guide and help you as an employee. The guidance is there because your leaders have an obligation to model and enforce the policies. And two, sometimes something happens or someone says something that you may think isn't okay. You look around, expecting somebody to do something about that, and in those moments, please know that it's okay to reach out to your supervisor or HR, and we can help you figure out a plan. By the end of this training, we should be able to understand why the company and employees need protections, know the rules and understand the why behind them, know when to ask for help and where to go for it, and be a team player who can make a positive impact. Now that you have a little history about HR and leadership, we are ready to get started. First of all, compliance policies are sometimes referred to as heavy policies. We will cover policies which include the following: Equal Employment Opportunity, EEO, Anti-Harassment and Prohibition of Sexual Harassment, Americans with Disabilities and Reasonable Accommodation, Anti-Violence and Anti-Bullying, Obligation to Report, and Prohibition of Retaliation. Yes, they are rules. In fact, policies are resolute behavior expectations. This is a violation which results in disciplinary action, up to and including termination, which differs from general program or plan information. But they're more than that. Policies set the ground rules for how we work with one another, and how we treat others, and how we expect to be treated. Every policy we'll talk about here is important, but these heavier topics are often more sensitive for people. These policies not only define critical expectations for how we treat one another, their provisions are also dictated by federal laws. Equal Employment Opportunity, or EEO, means freedom from discrimination on the basis of protected classes including race, color, national origin, religion, age, sex, gender, sexual orientation, physical or mental disability, and retaliation. The laws apply to all types of work situations, including hiring, firing, promotions, harassment, training, wages, and benefits. Now that we have reviewed protected classes, let's take a look at the extensive list. This list has evolved over time. And protection means job protection, treating people equally or not discriminating. Our commitment to you is that our company doesn't discriminate, and we need your commitment to do the same. You will see this reflected throughout our other policies as well. So we know that people age 40 and over are in a protected class. But let's talk about how generations work together. After all, each of us play a part in protecting ourselves and the company from legal issues. But just as important is building a culture of interaction, understanding, and support. For example, we've heard a lot about millennials over the last few years, and now millennials, those born between about 1980 and 2000, comprise half of the American workforce, and by 2025, 75% of the global workforce. Today, we're not going to dig into the myths and truths about generational differences, but we do want to point out that assumptions and biases aren't always factual. For example, one millennial stereotype is they want a trophy for everything. Actually, many studies show there are positive and motivational effects of rewarding everyone for basic effort. Another example of a millennial stereotype is they need to know why. Not only millennials want to know why, most people and employees want to know why they're being asked to do something and want an explanation up front. It's okay for you to ask why. Before we move on, there is something else you should know as it relates to EEO. Your supervisor, leadership team, and HR partner has an obligation to report issues or complaints. Obviously, if you report a complaint, your supervisor has an obligation to do something about it. We'll talk more about those steps later. For example, if you tell your supervisor, I don't want to report this, but I just wanted someone to know. Your supervisor still must report it. Your supervisor will communicate with you so you know what to expect and that they have a legal and moral obligation. What if you see something yourself, but no one else seems to have noticed, or they don't seem to think it's a big deal? You still need to do something about it. The action can vary from a conversation to documentation to something more serious, but you still are obligated to report. Once again, if you don't say anything about it, we can't do anything to help. Our next topic is anti-harassment and prohibition of sexual harassment policy. We will learn important details about harassment, such as harassment can be directed towards people involving the protective EEO statuses we just talked about, from age to gender to race, for example, including sexual harassment. Sometimes harassment is obvious, like when someone makes a comment about someone else's religion or calls someone a derogatory name. Other times, though, harassment is a result of different perspectives, and it can sometimes be unintentional. So, harassment can be unintentional? Yes, here's a true example. Jim reported to me that Amy is making discriminatory comments about his race and ethnicity. When I asked Amy about it, she said that they'd been talking about their favorite lunch place, and Amy asked Jim if he liked Chinese food because his family is from China. Amy didn't realize that Jim was offended and actually thought that he was amused. From Jim's perspective, he agreed that he hadn't initially been offended. He said that over a couple of weeks, though, Amy didn't let it go. Jim explained that Amy not only commented about Chinese food, but she brought it up nearly every day and started using fake accents. The final straw was that she'd pulled out her smartphone to show him her favorite South Park episode, which poked fun at Chinese people. Knowing your audience and knowing when to stop are key. Talking about Chinese food restaurant spots is fine. Crossing the line to mimic or ridicule, or to not let something go, is not fine. Think of it another way. Picture me sitting with my old college buddies watching my favorite football team, and when they make a bad play, I might roll my eyes and call them idiots. The next weekend, I'm watching my 3-year-old daughter at her ballet recital, and she gets the choreography wrong. My reaction is going to be completely different. In other words, do not assume behavior that is not offensive to you is acceptable to others, as harassment is often defined by the person receiving it. Yes, it's good to be yourself, but know your audience and be the work-appropriate version of yourself. Let's read this slide together. Hey Ted, are you free for lunch today? I'm happily married. Leave me alone. Relax, I only want to network with you. Is it because I'm ugly? So the cartoon is an extreme example, but it goes to show that perceptions can differ. Communication can help. You may make it known that the behavior should be stopped immediately. One lunch invite might be okay, but say that she continued to ask Ted to lunch every day even after he declines. That crosses the line into something that may constitute sexual harassment. Again, do not assume behavior that is not offensive to you is acceptable to others, as harassment is often defined by the person receiving it. Sexual harassment and the Me Too movement means that people are coming forward with complaints more and more. It may be tempting to take the easy way out if you see something, or not to report something to your manager or HR, but don't. Remember that your leader is obligated to look into each situation. Your leader may not immediately inform you what the outcome will be, but you did the right thing in taking the first step. Your leader or HR will communicate with you and let you know that the issue is being handled appropriately. Your leader or HR will document the situation along the way and may conduct an investigation when needed. Moving on to our next topic, we'll talk about Americans with disabilities. Sometimes you hear ADA. This is the Act, or ADAAA, which refers to the amendment which became effective in 2009. This is the ADA Amendments Act. The key messages here are: we don't discriminate against people with disabilities, and we provide reasonable accommodations. The definition of a disability includes regarded as having such an impairment, and is something to pay attention to. If we believe that someone has a disability, then they are covered by the Act, whether they do or not. Because of this, use caution in what you say or write. Instead, ask questions, and we're going to talk about this in a minute. What is a disability according to the law and this policy? This definition is intentionally open so that it can include somebody with a visible disability, like someone in a wheelchair, as much as someone whose disability you cannot see, like an employee with depression or cancer. It is each employee's or applicant's responsibility to request an accommodation based on a disability. Signia can't and won't tell you what you need. The company will manage employee performance, and the company will help you through the accommodation request process. The second piece to this policy is our commitment to providing reasonable accommodations. But what does reasonable accommodation mean? Providing reasonable accommodations means that we will do our best to enable you to do your job. Signia is committed to reasonable accommodations for qualified individuals with known disabilities, unless doing so would be an undue hardship to the business or cause a direct threat to health or safety. Disabilities include physical and mental disabilities that substantially limit one or more major life activity. It is not the responsibility of a supervisor to have these discussions with an employee. If an employee or candidate asks a supervisor for an accommodation to do their job, it is best that the supervisor contact Human Resources. We can then interact with the candidate or employee to determine the appropriate next steps. Providing reasonable accommodations means that we will do our best to enable employees to do their job. For example, if a candidate in a wheelchair applies for a job driving a bus, could they be hired in this role? What kind of accommodations might be requested? A few considerations that may be reasonable are: perhaps the candidate can sit in a normal driver's seat and requests a secure place within arm's distance to store the wheelchair. The candidate may request driving a special bus, which has gas and brakes operated by hand, not by foot. It also may be possible for the candidate to request a bus without a seat so they can use their own chair. Accommodations may be available for religious beliefs and pregnancy-related conditions as well. If you would like to discuss or request a reasonable accommodation, reach out to your supervisor or HR and we'll help you through it. As an employee, what else should you know about? 1. About reasonable accommodations. Remember that not all requests are fulfilled, and your employer is not immediately obligated to comply. 2. About the interactive process. The interactive process is the process you go through with your supervisor or HR to identify your need. Interactive means you may go back and forth several times. The key is that this is a cooperative process and you're working together to create a reasonable accommodation. And 3, about informing your supervisor. When the interactive process is taking place, it's helpful to answer questions when asked what accommodations you need in order to do your job. Although you may not receive an immediate response, you can expect a timely one or ongoing communication until the process is complete. And 4, regarding documentation, if your accommodation request is based on a medical need, you may need to provide documentation upon request. The documentation should not include confidential information about your condition. Instead, you may need to provide clear statements or detail about what the specific accommodation request entails. Now we'll move on to our next topic, anti-violence and anti-bullying. We'll talk about how violence can impact us at work. Did you know that the Occupational Safety and Health Act, or OSHA, requires employers to maintain reasonably safe and healthy workplaces, which extends to some incidents of workplace violence? I recently read a story on social media about a parent whose child complained of being bullied at school. The parent notified the teacher, and a few days later, the teacher informed the parent that there was no bullying going on. She explained that she carefully stood in the center of the playground and that she didn't witness any hitting or punching. Let's be clear, hitting does fall under the violence and bullying, but that's not the only example we should watch out for in the workplace. Are you aware of intentional bullying or violence that may happen in the workplace? Some examples include punching or hitting, use of weapons, stalking, and name-calling that is hurtful. Those are good examples of verbal and physical bullying, but sometimes bullying may be less obvious, such as gesture bullying, like nonverbal threatening gestures, or even glances that convey threatening messages, are considered bullying. Or exclusion, socially or physically isolating or disregarding a person in work-related activities. This is bullying. Think about our earlier example, which started with a conversation about Chinese food. Part of the definition of bullying is that it is persistent. If the conversation stopped there, it would have been fine, but it kept going on and on. And remember that one size doesn't fit all. Sometimes something that can be intended as a joke might be perceived by another person as violence or bullying too. Mass shootings dominate the news in the days that follow. And while violent incidents in the workplace don't always generate national headlines, they are every bit as devastating to the victims and their loved ones. For instance, according to new data from the Society of Human Resources Management in 2019, 1 out of 7 Americans don't feel safe at work. The Aurora, Illinois community made national headlines in 2019 for a workplace shooting that left 5 people dead and several police officers injured. With workplace shootings occurring at places like Aurora, the Annapolis Capital Gazette, the Washington Navy Yard, and others in recent years, this statistic is not surprising. Here are a couple of actions to take during a violent incident, and please note that we will provide ongoing training and communication to you. I know that talking about the idea of having an active assailant in our workspace may feel uncomfortable, but we're talking about it anyway because we feel that preparing for something can help if the worst were ever to happen. We also believe that giving you the knowledge to make the right decisions can help protect you and your coworkers if you suddenly found yourself in a bad situation. This discussion we're having right now is the first step to prevention. No one responds well to a situation we are not prepared for, so we all need to understand what to do in an emergency. First, try to assess the situation. If there's a path to escape, it's always better to run to safety. If that's not possible, you can hide. If running or hiding aren't options and you're caught in the open, you can always pick up whatever is available and throw it. Next, notify a leader or HR. Work can be a danger zone for those with an abusive partner, since work is often the only place they can be found. If you're willing to notify HR if you have a restraining order against someone, we can work together to protect you and others. If you learn that a fellow employee is in this situation, reach out to HR. Always watch for warning signs. Recognize warning signs of potential violence around the workplace too. Some signs include angry outbursts, threats, even indirect ones, sudden changes in behavior, and don't be afraid to escalate. The minute someone says, "I don't feel safe," encourage the employee to talk to their supervisor or HR. If a fellow employee has made a direct threat or gives you reason to believe they are dangerous, call 911. Don't be afraid to contact the police or security. Then, always let your supervisor, a senior leader, or HR know what's going on. All employees are expected to know that violence or threats will not be tolerated. Watch for flags from fellow employees and from others in the workspace, including external clients, vendors, and visitors. Remember that we do not allow violence or threats of violence, including bullying such as persistent, malicious behavior which offends, intimidates, or humiliates another employee. As we move to our next topic, you may have noticed that we have mentioned obligation to report throughout this session. And note we're saying obligation. This may be submitting an anonymous report to the number posted in your workspace. You may have seen the Tell Us poster, which lists the number as 855-4-TELL-US, or following the expectation for all employees at all levels to report actions which are in violation of the law or company policies. We can't say this enough. The company needs employees to express concerns, big or small, so that we know about them and so we can take action. If we don't know, we can't do anything. Also, at the beginning of this training, we talked about the legal ramifications if you, as an employee, brings up a concern regarding a violation of the law, and if the company doesn't do anything about it. Just look at the news and you'll see all sorts of companies and individuals facing difficult situations and suffering consequences. Your supervisor and HR are available and willing to help. If you submit a complaint to your supervisor, HR may be looped in as a partner. If you're not sure whether or not your supervisor or HR needs to know, inform them just to be safe. Your ethics hotline is Tell Us. You can call this phone number and leave a message anonymously or not to report or talk about anything you may feel uncomfortable discussing at work. All messages left on this line will be heard, taken seriously, and investigated with discretion. Our final topic is the policy of prohibition of retaliation. When HR investigates reports, they do their best to protect the people involved. But let's be honest, sometimes the questions asked during an investigation may lead others to make assumptions about who reported them. While we can't guarantee confidentiality, we do have a very strict policy against retaliation. This means that any person who has made a report, raised questions or concerns, or participated in an investigation will not be retaliated against. If you ever do perceive retaliation for any reason, follow the reporting procedure, notify leadership or HR. We take this seriously. Here are a few examples of perceived retaliation. They include moving someone to a different workspace or building, changing job duties or a job reassignment, changing shifts or schedules, poor job evaluations, a demotion, discipline, termination, or a salary reduction. I recently investigated a case of retaliation. The manager had been accused of being in a romantic relationship with her employee. We investigated that situation and actually found that they had not done anything wrong, so no one was written up, fired, or even coached. Then I learned that this same manager was not giving another employee shifts, someone completely different. This was an hourly employee at a retail location, so when she wasn't scheduled or when she was sent home from her shift early, she wasn't getting paid. This situation came to me, and I learned that the manager believed it was this employee who reported the alleged romantic relationship. The manager was fired for retaliation. The ironic thing was that the original reporter of the romantic relationship was someone else entirely. Retaliation can come in many forms, from taking shifts away to withholding promotions to firing somebody. If it's the result of reporting something to management or HR, it's not acceptable. Remember, too, that retaliation can come from managers, but it can also come from employees. Here you might also see it in the form of bullying, violence, or harassment. As an employee, remember these key points. It is unlawful to retaliate against employees. Management should not take actions that could be perceived as retaliation. Management is responsible for ensuring there is no retaliation. All employees should be treated fairly. That concludes the module focusing on the heavy policies, which are driven by laws. Now we're moving into reviewing Signia's conduct policies, which are also included in the employee handbook. While some of these may be influenced by laws, like drug use, for example, these policies are driven by what the company feels are important. They are the company standards and conditions which the company feels are important. Again, for each policy, I'll explain the company conduct policies, including what this means for you as an employee. At the end of our session, you will be prepared to test your knowledge with a short quiz. We'll start with confidential information. These are official sounding words that really mean that we shouldn't share things about the company that shouldn't be shared. No, this doesn't mean you can't talk about your work or what we do at Signia. In fact, we want you to spread the word about how great our company is. Confidentiality just means that you can't share private information about the company, our clients, or about other employees. This might include trade secrets, client lists, or personal information about others. If you're not sure what private means, always err on the side of caution, and feel free to discuss any questions with your supervisor or HR at any time. As an employee, it's important that confidential information remains confidential. Obtain approval from your supervisor or HR before disclosing or releasing information. Personal information that you share with your supervisor or HR, or personal information that fellow employees share with you, may be considered medical information and is personal and private. Be cautious and respectful with this type of information. We will discuss this further on the next slide. Internet usage and data protection technically fall under the category of confidentiality, but we want to call it out since there are some legal ramifications here. Employee internet access has become commonplace. The internet provides instant access to information and is a vehicle for employee communication and has been deemed a necessary productivity tool for most employers. Rightly so, much of the last decade's productivity gains can be attributed to the internet. However, while the internet offers email, e-commerce, and research tools, it also opens more avenues for employee distraction, ranging from the innocent, entertainment and shopping, to the offensive, such as gambling and pornography. As an employee, you are expected to use the internet responsibly and productively. Internet access is limited to job-related activities only, and personal use is not permitted. Acceptable actions are job-related activities including research and educational tasks, which are helpful to your role. All sites and downloads may be monitored and/or blocked by Signia if they are deemed to be harmful or not productive to business. The installation of software, such as but not limited to instant messaging or social media technology, is strictly prohibited. Unacceptable use of the internet by employees includes but is not limited to sending or posting discriminatory, harassing, or threatening messages or images on the internet or via Signia email service. Using any company system to execute any form of fraud or software, film, or music piracy. Stealing, using, or disclosing someone else's password without authorization. Downloading, copying, or pirating software and electronic files that are subject to copyright protection or without authorization. Disclosing confidential material, trade secrets, or proprietary information belonging to Signia Marketing outside of the organization. And sending or posting on any social media site information that is disparaging to the company, its products, services, colleagues, or customers. And also introducing malicious software onto the company network and jeopardizing the security of the organization's electronic communication system. Sending or posting chain letters, solicitations, or advertisements not related to business purposes or activities. And passing off personal views as representing those of the organization. And external connections are not allowed. You are not allowed to plug any external device outside of company-issued hardware into any company computer. If you are unsure about what constitutes acceptable internet usage, then ask your supervisor for further guidance and clarification. Additionally, federal and state laws impose rules for protecting sensitive and private employee information. Management has a responsibility to enforce laws and ensure best practice for handling employee data by maintaining appropriate protocols for the following: collection, storage, access, discussion, and retention. All aspects of employee data are included in privacy laws, including employment, personal, and health data. The examples of protected information are listed for you on the chart. We've seen trends in liability claims, and this is a big area of focus for the Equal Employee Opportunity Office, and health information is a big focus. While there are states with high numbers of claims, no one is safe. There are EEO offices everywhere. So what happens if you don't comply or there's a violation of the law? For example, identity theft, discrimination claims, lawsuits or litigation, or penalties or fines. This can result in management being personally liable which could lead to damaged company reputation and trust. The bottom line is violation of employee privacy, data protection, and internet usage may result in disciplinary action up to and including termination. As an employee, it's important that you maintain appropriate internet usage. You play a role in safeguarding employee information, adhering to protecting employee data, and complying with privacy laws. When in doubt, obtain approval from your supervisor before disclosing or releasing information. Our next topic is regarding drugs, alcohol, and tobacco. You shouldn't be surprised to hear that the company expects a smoke and tobacco-free environment and will not tolerate the use or possession of illegal drugs, the possession of, use of, or being under the influence of alcohol during working hours, while performing company business, or otherwise while on company premises. Violation of these policies is grounds for discipline, up to and including termination. But what about legal drugs, like marijuana? Although marijuana is legalized in some states, we know that it still impairs your judgment. We are committed to a safe and productive work environment. So whether you live somewhere marijuana is legal or not, possession or use of marijuana while at work or on work time is still a violation of policy. What about other legal drugs like aspirin or Robitussin? Obviously, over-the-counter drugs, including these, are okay as long as they're used according to the directions. What about prescription drugs? If you're using a prescription which does not affect your ability to work safely and effectively, then it's fine. That said, our policy outlines prescription drugs as follows. First, prescription drugs which are not used in accordance to the written prescription are not allowed. Second, if prescription drugs affect your ability to work safely and effectively, we might have more questions to talk about. In these cases, reach out to HR and we can work with you and your doctor to see if an accommodation is needed. Like some of these other substances, alcohol can impair judgment too. We expect that you typically won't be at work under the influence of alcohol. That said, from time to time, responsible possession and consumption of alcohol may be permitted. Even at these times, though, alcohol should not impede your judgment or your ability to perform your job responsibilities. Remember, our offices are tobacco and smoke-free, so please be respectful of others around you. As an employee, just remember, you are expected to follow the company policies. You are accountable for meeting performance expectations. HR is available to support you if there are potential medical implications such as ADA, FMLA, or workers' compensation. Let's move on to our final topic, office cleanliness and personal appearance. Some of you probably had parents who told you to clean your room as a kid, and you don't want to hear that anymore, certainly not from your employer. And we're not forcing you to be a neat freak unless you're happiest that way. We just want to make sure that we keep a work environment that feels good to all of us. And we want to make a good first impression when we have visitors to our office. Same goes with your personal appearance. We provide a list of the clothes you can and can't wear. You're an adult working in a professional environment. Make sure you're dressed appropriately. If you're not sure, don't wear it, or at least check with a supervisor first. Finally, we know that some of us have sensitivities to odors, from reheated fish at lunch to perfume. Please be aware of those around you and be respectful. A couple of simple reminders as an employee. You are a representative of the company. Refer to the company handbook and be familiar with the dress code policy, which spells out the specifics regarding professional dress, business casual wear, casual Fridays, and relaxed dress code for weekends and nights after regular business hours. This concludes our session together. Thank you for your attention while we covered so many important policies throughout this HR compliance overview training module. Now that you have increased your knowledge of policies and the HR function, you can feel more confident entering the workplace environment. To test your knowledge, you will be receiving a quiz to complete. Upon successful completion of the quiz, you will earn a training certificate. Good luck, and thanks again.